Hello! Just making sure everything is clicking in and working well. You should be able to hear me. Say hello in the chat. Let us know who you are, where you're watching from. We are officially live. I believe we're live on YouTube and on LinkedIn, which is very, very exciting. If we are new to getting to know each other, or if we've only passed each other virtually a handful of times, my name is Brian Miller. I am an author, speaker, coach, and consultant on human connection, and welcome to this special live edition of Thursday Thoughts. Thursday Thoughts is the YouTube series that I do every Thursday. It's basically a video version of my blog, humanconnection.blog, and everything that I do here on Thursday Thoughts, which are typically produced YouTube videos, is about insights and stories and science behind human connection. And over the last 5 or 6 months, it's really been all about how we can connect in a virtual world as everything's changing so quickly on a daily basis. Project Max, appreciate you being here. The legend himself. Yeah, I appreciate you being here. Thanks so much for that. We'll give some folks a few minutes to click in here. I've got something kind of cool for you today. You may have never listened to my actual podcast before, and that's totally fine. Obviously, there's a lot of things that we can actually do and pay attention to on a daily basis now. So the fact that anybody listens, watches any of my content, reads any of my blog, I consider it a great honor. And for the folks who like the ideas that they hear in my Thursday Thoughts episodes or my blog or the social media snippets, I wanted to give a chance to explore the podcast without having to commit to an hour and a half long episode basically every week. Snarky Guy, connecting to you late Thursday night in Shanghai where it's slightly hotter than a $5 pistol. I don't know about what the second half of that means, but I was actually thinking of you when I decided to do this at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. I was trying to be mindful of folks like you over there on the other side of the world. I know it's late, but I figured it wasn't too late. A lot of times I go on at 1 or 2 p.m. and it's just too late for you guys on the other side of the world. So I'm so glad you are here. I was thinking of you when I scheduled this time. So, as I was saying, I wanted to have the ability to give folks a taste of the podcast without having to commit to an hour and a half, 2-hour long episode every week or every other week. And so actually designed after 3 seasons. Well, let me back that up for a second. A couple of years ago, I set out to create a podcast of my own. And when I did that, I never imagined that I would be sitting down with legends and leaders of industries. And I mean true legends and leaders of industries, including many of my personal and professional heroes. It's been just this unbelievable, I'm going to use the word journey, and I know that that's kind of a cliche word, but what an incredible journey it's been since I decided to launch the podcast to now, having done 3 seasons and 60 episodes and just dozens of interviews with truly exceptional people. I see Max just commenting, Evan, play guitar, do vocals for my own metal band, tuning in from the studio in North Carolina. North Carolina in the house. You're on Eastern Standard with me. Guitar and vocals. There you go. Project Max. Lovely, lovely. Project Max, let us know which bands are you inspired by? Which bands do you sound like if you were going to describe the sound of your band? Let us know in the chat. So, as I set out to do this podcast, it originally, let's switch over here. It originally, was one new person. That's how many of you discovered the podcast for the first time. One new person, because I launched the podcast in conjunction with my first book, 3 New People, Make the Most of Your Daily Interactions and Stop Missing Amazing Opportunities. And the original conception of the podcast was to explore the 3 New People philosophy from the book, which is all about making the most of your daily interactions. And so I started out by bringing folks on to talk about the relationships and the chance encounters that led to their success. And it was really, really cool. And we did that for 2 seasons. And over the course of 2 seasons, it started to morph into something bigger than itself. It started to become less and less about the themes from my book and more about the role of luck in success and how building true connection and relationships with others is so valuable both to our personal success and our professional success. Now, when I talk about success, right, that's a word that is thrown around a lot, and clearly it's subjective. But what I mean when I say is however you define living a life that is worthwhile and doing work that matters, right? Whatever that means to you. So I would bring on these incredible folks to chat about their chance encounter. I've got somebody asking, Foley Pixels, who is he doing this for? Who am I doing what for? Who's he, and what are you asking about, my friend? Let me know. So what was I just talking about? So I would bring on these people to talk about chance encounters, and essentially each person who came on the show, when it was one new person, was here to tell me a story of one chance encounter that happened in their life or career, something that happened at some point in their life or career that was just truly meaningful to them. And it could have been a personal story. Some people would tell me a story, randomly talked to an old lady on a bus, never saw her again, but that conversation changed my life. Others told the story of the person, how they randomly met their future spouse. Others told incredible business stories and everything in between. And as we went forward, I realized moving into season 3 that the show had gotten so far away from my book, the concept of my book originally, that I decided that I wanted to shift gears a little bit, and so we became Beyond Networking, which was a way for me to double down and focus the podcast about the professional relationships and professional chance encounters, which, of course, all ties into our personal life. Work-life balance is kind of a misnomer, as the first guest kind of clip, the first clip I'm about to show you, is something that the person from the first clip that I'm about to show you talks about a lot, the difference between work-life balance. So, having said that, I realized that the podcast really became about how do you connect with anyone, which is where all this career for me started back in 2015 when I gave that little TEDx talk, How to Magically Connect with Anyone, and it just exploded from there. And so as we moved forward in the podcast and it became Beyond Networking, this question, how do you connect with anyone? How do you build a network of people who trust you, right? How do you weave a network of people who feel heard, understood, and valued in your presence? Because that is the fundamental thesis of the show now. And it took us 3 seasons to get to really work that out. But the fundamental thesis of the show is every interaction is meaningful and every person you meet is important. I'll say that again. Every interaction is meaningful and every person you meet is important. That is what the show is about. So after 3 seasons and dozens of conversations, I decided to take all of my guests' wisdom on human connection across 3 major content areas: social interaction, networking, and work/education, and compile it. And I've compiled it into a PDF resource, a beautifully designed ebook, and a companion audio experience, which is about 75 minutes and contains the clips from the podcast itself. So, having said that, I'm going to share with you here clips from 5 of my favorite pieces of advice given from these legends and leaders who've come on my show about how to connect with anyone. These are clips from the podcast. Some of these do have video versions on the channel. Some of them don't. So I'm going to show you all the audio versions here. I hope you enjoy these. I'll chat a little bit in between each clip to give you a sense of exactly why I think these particular clips are so worthwhile. So let me just pull these up right here. the first clip, here we go. The first clip is from the legend himself, Seth Godin. Seth Godin is my personal and professional hero. He is the father of modern marketing. It's this guy right here, Seth Godin. He's the father of modern marketing. He's written 19 New York Times best-selling books. He's written a daily blog for like 25 years. There's over 8,000 blog posts with millions of daily readers. He's a prolific public speaker. This guy is incredible. And I had just the insane fortune of meeting him in person by chance encounter. Met him in an airport a couple of years ago, and he went from being a hero to a mentor and somebody that is a friendly acquaintance, maybe a friend. I think if I said he was a friend, he would consider me a friend at this point as well. But I've been very, very lucky to know this guy, not just through his work, but now personally. There's nobody in the world of business kinder and more generous than Seth Godin. And here is a short 3-minute clip of him explaining his view on how to magically connect with anyone, how to make a meaningful connection with anyone. And the fundamental thesis of his insight here is there must be something that we have in common. So you can take a listen to this, and we'll be back. Agree with fundamentally, especially whatever, in whatever niche you're talking about. But often you don't agree with someone, and occasionally you have no idea where they're coming from. This happened in American politics in the past couple of years. It happens between managers and employees. How do you connect with someone that you don't understand?
It is possible that there's someone on earth who I totally understand, but I have never met them. Everybody does. Some people like milk chocolate. I still find this impossible to believe. But there must be something about their humanity that we have in common. There must be some, like, do you hope that your kids will have a good life? Yeah, okay, so let's talk about that. Do you get satisfaction from going for a walk on a nice spring day? Well, yeah. Why? Let's talk about how that feels. Do you like change or fear change? Because I could talk to either group of people and be able to make assertions about their life. These are strategies. These aren't tactics. Along the way, someone may come up with the tactic that we should burn as much coal as we possibly can to get as much electricity as we possibly can, because if we get richer, then we'll have more resources, and then we'll be able to build new technology and the world will be saved. Now, you and I can disagree about that because I think that's foolish. But we can both agree that you're doing it for the same reason I'm doing it, which is you care about your unborn grandchildren. And so let's start there. And then the second half of it, which is where it often falls apart for me, is do you actually believe in the scientific method, or are you just pretending to believe in the scientific method? If you don't believe in the scientific method, I have plenty of time for you, and there are lots of things we can talk about. But if you're pretending, it's going to take me a few minutes to discover that you've chosen this path because it usually gets you through many engagements. But my desire to connect with you as a fellow scientific thinker is going to ultimately fail. And so that's where it usually falls apart for me. I had someone in my office the other day, and she'd written a book, so I was being congratulatory to her. And it was one of those books about how money seems to be attracted to people who are ready for it. It's the psychology, the philosophy of being open to getting past the resistance. And I said, but you don't think that money is actually aware of how you're thinking? And she said, oh, no, I am. And I said, so how does that work? How does my thinking get to the money? And then the whole thing fell apart after that. Because I care. I'm a trained engineer. I care very much about how things actually work. And so if someone is persuaded themselves to believe in the other kind of magic, it's harder for me to find connection. That is a huge Achilles heel of mine.
So I love what Seth just said here right at the end. What Oh, I'm sorry. I just had a comment come in. You know what? I'll address that right now. I'm going to address that. Who your target audience? I'm a fan of your audio content. You're doing different types of content now. Yes, I've been doing different types of content for almost 3 years now. My channel shifted over to maybe 3 years ago to exclusively focusing on my work as my professional work, what I actually do for a living, which is I'm a speaker and an author and a consultant and a coach on human connection. And it's a great question. This is actually an interesting topic for a future, which is over the course of time, as a public figure, as a content creator, if you change your focus, what do you do with your audience? Do you lose them? Do you try to bring them along? Do you build a new channel? What do you do? So I did both of those things. I announced about, I don't know, 2-3 years ago that this channel, this main channel, would be exclusively moving forward all about my work in human connection. And I built a brand new channel exclusively for the audio gear and tutorials and reviews. And I will, let me toss that into let me just toss that on the screen right here. Hang on a second. It's called Audio for Content Creators. And if you just go ahead and search for that on YouTube, Audio for Content Creators. I've plugged it many, many, many times over the last couple of years. And so that is where all of, well, I've plugged that over the last 6-8 months. I built about 6-8 months ago a brand new YouTube channel just for oh, you don't sound arrogant at all. You don't sound arrogant at all. It's a great question, and it actually goes right to the heart of human connection, what we're talking about right here. I did, in fact, and don't worry about it. I've, with 17, 18,000 folks here on my YouTube channel, it's impossible with the YouTube algorithm to have reached everybody and explain. And I got tired of explaining over and over and over and over again in every video and wasting time in every video that this channel was shifting its focus. So I hoped by now I'd reached everybody with that message who wanted to. And yeah, so you can go ahead and subscribe to the Audio for Content Creators channel to continue getting that. I've got online courses and all kinds of stuff, private Facebook forum, all built out for that. This channel is exclusively about my work in human connection. Feel free to stick around for it, or if it's not your jam, no worries. Go head over to the Audio for Content Creators and you'll get nothing but audio stuff over there. Okay, so getting back to Seth, because what he said here is just so valuable, which is we might disagree on how to get there, but let's find out, are we doing it for the same reason? And you find this a lot these days. Yes. You find this a lot these days where both sides of the aisle on any particular debate, either side of a debate, are pretty much doing it for the same fundamental reason. We're just disagreeing on how we actually get there. So having said that, I love that at the end of Seth's clip there, he said, but there are some things that he just can't get past, and that's okay. There will be fundamental differences with others. We don't have to connect with everyone. The goal is that we can connect with anyone. We're not going to connect with everyone. And if you focus on the fact that human connection is about understanding and not agreement, then it's easier to see this. So moving into the next clip I wanted to share today. This is from my friend Gertrude Matche. Gertrude is a serial social entrepreneur. She is extraordinary. She is from Africa, lives in New Zealand now, travels the world, does incredible work, truly lives a life that's meaningful and does really important work. And she gave, I had the good fortune of coaching her, is how I met her. I was her coach for her TEDx talk, Ubuntu 2.0, which she gave last year in 2019, and it was an exceptional talk. Not enough people have seen this talk. It's the people who have seen it have been completely transformed by it. I'm going to share a clip. It was unbelievable. I got to meet up with her in person. And here's what she looks like while I'm talking about that. I got to meet up with Gertrude in person at her TEDx conference. Now, she was flying in from New Zealand to give a TEDx talk at a tiny little place in upstate New York that was only 4 hours from where I live. So I actually drove up, stayed the night, and got to meet. I usually don't get to meet the people that I work with, that I coach, that are international. They're all over the world. And so it was such a glorious thing to be able to meet her in person and actually watch her live on the day give the TEDx talk we'd spent months working on. And so what we did is the next morning before I had to take off and before she had to take off and get back on planes internationally, we set up in a hotel room and recorded for 2 hours a podcast. And here is Gertrude explaining the concept in her philosophy and her culture of I am because you are. I am because you are, which is the fundamental thrust of Ubuntu, the African philosophy. Here's Gertrude explaining that.
Ubuntu is an African philosophy enshrined in the belief that a person is a person through other people. So Ubuntu, Ngamuntu, Ngavantu is the literal translation. In Africa, we believe that humanity is one. I could not be here without you, and you could not be there without me. So it's in the observation of each other that we exist. And it's a way of being, it's a way of living. And I didn't realize how magical it was until I left Africa. Oh. So when I went to London for the first time, or the second time, I was 19. I had gone to study, and I lived in a society where people didn't look me in the eye. And I felt like I was disappearing. And I would phone home and cry and say to my mom, I feel like I'm not here. And my mother would say, what do you mean? I'm like, nobody looks at me. Nobody sees me. So when we greet in Southern Africa, we say sabona, which means I see you. And it's not just the seeing of sight. It's my acknowledging you as another human being. And so it was a struggle for me when I first left Africa. I felt like a fish out of water because my very existence up until that point was based on the people around me. It was based on community. And I lost that when I moved to London for the first time.
It's so interesting that you say you lost that, because I feel like we hear it a lot, especially in America today, that, it's so divisive and so distracted. We're so disconnected. And I've always wondered, is that really just here? Is it everywhere? And what's interesting to me about that is that you were born in that and you lived that philosophy. And then when you left, did you feel like you lost it, or that you were unable to take it with you because the cultures that you went into, the new places you went into, they didn't have that same philosophy? Is that which one happened?
I think it's the second.
Yeah.
I kept it in me. I kept trying to connect.
Yeah.
And every once in a while, I would have these magical moments where I would bump into these random strangers who saw me, who looked at me, who had a present conversation with me. Because the other thing about Ubuntu is about being fully present to someone when you speak to them. So in the societies where I've lived out of Africa, people don't do that as a natural thing.
What are they not doing? Like, what? I feel like that's a harder question than what are you used to people doing?
I'm used to people just being authentic. They're not fronting. They're not trying to be something. They're not trying to impress you. People are just who they are. And so I come from a culture where in my language, there is no sarcasm. There's no innuendo in our language. So if somebody says something to you, they mean what they say. So Ubuntu is also in the language. And this is something else that I discovered after I left Africa, just how it's interwoven in so many ways. Like if you wake up in the morning, you say to someone, Mangwana ni mamukase. And it means, good morning, how did you rise? And the answer is, Ndamuka kanamamukawo, which means, I woke up well if you woke up well. So if you're not okay, I'm not okay.
Okay, so I know that was kind of a long one, and I really wanted to share that entire clip with you. To get to that, that last bit right there. I woke up well if you woke up well. If you're not okay, I'm not okay. And I see Snarky Guy just said, I love her voice. I could listen to the accent all day. Man, I agree with you. I could not only listen to her accent all day, I could just listen to Gertrude speak all day. She is one of the most incredible, truly genuine people I've met in my life. It was like a weird fate that brought us together, and the fact that we were able to meet in person was incredible. I'm still, working with her and friends with her to this day, and her story is insane. You really, really should listen if you haven't had a chance to her podcast episode. And actually, hers is one of the video ones, so it's on this channel. If you search for her name on my channel, you'll find it. And there's a full hour and a half long video of us just having a conversation with hardly any cuts or edits in it, because it was just there wasn't anything I was willing to take out. It was so gripping, and her story is just exceptional. So I'm not sure how much more needs to be said about what she said here, but this idea of human connection, of viewing it in this perspective of humanity as one. I could not be here without you, and you could not be there without me. Oh, it's so good. It's such a it does feel like a non-Western way of approaching connection. And I get it's easy for me to get so wrapped up in like the Western approach to philosophy and to psychology and to sociology, and but you forget that there's the Eastern approach, there's African approach, and of course, saying African is crazy, right? Because it's a massive, massive continent with lots of different things, but it's just such a cool way of conceptualizing human connection and humanity. Moving on now to, speaking of Western, to a white guy, moving on to one of my favorite guests I've ever had. This was right up there for me with Seth Godin. I got to sit down with, I can't believe I'm even saying this. I got to sit down with Julian Treasure. Julian Treasure is a 5-time TED speaker. He is a TED legend with hundreds of millions of views. And his main famous TED talk that's got like 80 million views, it's one of the most popular TED talks ever given, is How to Speak So That People Want to Listen. And I got connected with Julian through a mutual friend, friend in the business, basically. And man, we just hit it off, because not only is he obsessed with communication, but he's also he founded the Sound Agency, I think is the name of it, where he works with organizations all over the world to fix the sound of their environments, to actually use audio engineering principles to improve the auditory experience in public places and in offices. And so we connected on a lot of different levels here. And the thing that he blew me away with is listen to the listening. Listen to the listening. And if that sounds mind-blowing, like Inception style to you, like how many layers deep are we going to go? Just listen to Julian explaining, listen to the listening. He's another person I could listen to his voice all day. This will be some of the most valuable advice you ever get. So I'm just going to hand it over to Julian.
That hits on a couple of things I talk about a lot with listening. First of all, that you always speak into a listening. And whether you're a professional speaker like you are and like I am, or whether you're talking one-to-one at your family or at work or wherever it may be, you always speak into a listening. And that's an important thing to consider, because it allows you to start asking the question, what's the listening I'm speaking into, which is listening to the listening. It's being sensitive to the receiver. And that is crucial, because the biggest mistake I see all the time people making is assuming that everybody listens like I do, and they do not. Because we listen through this set of filters that I talked about in my third TED talk, the one on conscious listening, the culture you're born into, the language you speak. So we just talked about, the Italian culture, and that is a different form of listening from, for example, Far East countries, where if somebody elderly speaks, it would be crushingly rude to talk over them and interrupt them because of the respect that there is for older, wiser people, and you know the way that whole thing works there. So it's very important to be sensitive to those things, the culture, the language, your values, attitudes, beliefs, the things that you accrete along the way from your parents originally, and then perhaps from friends, role models, teachers, whoever it might be. You choose some, you throw away others. I've chosen different ones and I've thrown away different ones, probably. There may be many similarities, but they will not be identical. And then in any given situation, you may have intentions, expectations, you may have emotions going on, assumptions about how the world works and what people think about me, and so forth. So there's all these things which create your listening. And everybody you speak to has got that going on too. So there's a couple of really important things that come with this, I think, transformational realization. The first is, if I become conscious of my filters, I can start playing with them, using them as control surfaces, changing my listening position, which is one of the exercises I really love. And if I'm conscious of other people's filters, then I can speak much more accurately into their listening, whether it's one person or 5,000 people. There's a listening there. And simply by asking yourself the question, what's the listening I'm speaking into? You can sense it. You can sense it. I mean, you know that on a stage. I know that on a stage. I can sense the listening I'm speaking. Is it just after lunch? They're a bit tired. The blood's all gone to their gut. Is it the end of the day? Am I the only thing in between them and the bar or going home? Is it first thing in the morning? Do they need waking up? You have to be sensitive to these things. Is it an older audience? Younger? What are the cultural references here? What are their problems? What are they really here for? What are they hoping for? How can I give a gift that's got some meaning to them? And all of these questions can apply in one-to-one conversation just as much. Easier one-to-one because we're seeing the other person right in front of us a lot of the time. And there are cues, there are visual cues, which we all know how to pick up, whether it's little facial expressions or body language or pheromones or whatever it might be. We're picking stuff up all the time, which gives us cues back. So speaking into the listening is a really, really fundamental part of getting people to listen to you. And I think many, many of the people who have the problem of not being listened to, it's largely because they don't ask that question. What's the listening I'm speaking into? Do they have the time? Are they interested in this? What will they be interested in? What's driving them? How can I make this conversation valuable to them?
Okay, that last bit right there. How can I make this conversation valuable to them? That question, how can I make this conversation valuable to them, is the key, right? That was the key of that entire thing. There's a listening. I love this conception, the being able to visualize the listening as its own entity, as a thing unto itself that can be understood and played with, and it's such a cool idea because now I can see it, right? When I'm speaking with somebody, when I'm giving a talk, whether it's virtually or in person, and I see them looking at me or listening to me, I visualize in my head that there is a physical thing called the listening space or the listening, with a capital L, that's going on right now. And what is that listening that I'm speaking into? What are they bringing to the table? And so often we just come in with our thing. I wrote a blog post about this on the humanconnection.blog site last year, the year before. It was one of my favorite blog posts. It was very short. It was about when planes take off without us. And I was drawing this analogy saying that a lot of times as speakers, as communicators, we come into what Julian would call a listening, and we basically just fire off with our thing. We bring what we planned on saying with our energy, with our speed, with our rhythm, with our tone, and it wasn't something that they were ready for. And so often what happens is the plane just takes off without them, right? We take off, like we're a plane and we just take off without them. And what do we know happens when a plane takes off without us? How many times have you been at the airport, you miss your flight, the plane takes off without you? Do you chase it down the tarmac? No, of course not, right? Of course not. That's ridiculous. We get annoyed that it took off without us, right? First we get pissed, And then once we're done being angry, we find a different plane or a different way to get there. And this is one of my favorite analogies for what happens when we're not sensitive to what Julian calls the listening. So I thought that was just such good advice. Moving forward here, same season, it was 2 episodes back to back. It was this season. I had Julian, and then episode 2, I had the inimitable Heather Monahan. Now, if you're on LinkedIn or in this world of paying attention to kind of up-and-coming thought leaders, motivational speakers, folks like that, as I am, Heather Monahan kind of exploded last year. She came out of nowhere. Of course, it's not really true. She spent 15 or 20 years in corporate America, and she broke through all these glass ceilings and has this amazing story. And then she ended up getting fired by her villain, her enemy, as she conceives it, as she tells the story. And after getting fired from a job where she had just won an award, like, I don't know, nights before, the week before, she'd won a massive industry award, huge honor, and then got fired from the position that she had built with this company. She set out on her own and became an author and a speaker. And essentially what she did is she built a whole platform on creating confidence, She wrote a book called Confidence Creator, which actually at one point when it was released, it knocked Donald Trump off the #1 spot in business books for a little while, which is pretty funny. And Heather and I were chatting all about confidence and its relation to human connection and to building meaningful relationships. And her big insight here in this clip is we don't have to be best friends. You'll find this is very reminiscent of what Seth was saying in the first clip about the fact that we don't need to agree, but we do need to try to understand. And so I think this is a relatively short clip. I'm going to play this for you right now from Heather Monahan, the confidence creator herself, about backstabbing in the workplace. This is what she's talking. This is the context in which this clip comes. She was talking about backstabbing in the workplace, particularly in corporate America. Here you go. What I want to ask you about is your TEDx talk. Because you very publicly went through the process of leading up to it with your LinkedIn family, and on your podcast you talked about it, and you were addressing the Me Too movement in a way that I think was surprising for people, right? You decided to address the Me Too movement by not so much talking about the issues of men with women, as we're hearing in the national conversation, but the issues of women with women. For what reason did you decide to focus on the other side of that?
Because it's not fair or just to only look at one side. I've been sexually harassed many times in corporate America, not just that one time, many times. However, I have been bullied and harassed by women just as much. And I'll tell you, it's not spoken about. The follow-up and vindication process doesn't exist. Lawyers will tell you straight out, it's too bad it wasn't a man doing it, that you'd have a much better chance, oh, that's too bad, unfortunate. No one wants to hear what really is happening with women stabbing each other in the back, trying to take each other down, bad mouthing. And for me personally, I became a person who could handle the guy that might try to sexually harass me. It got to a point where they stopped doing that because I knew how to manage the situation. I could see it coming from far away. I never felt that way with the women. I never knew who was really supporting me or just a teammate and who was actually going to stab me in the back and sabotage me. So I found the female harassers to be much worse than the male.
Where does that come from? Why you're not the first or anywhere near the only woman in corporate America I've ever heard say. I've heard almost every woman I know in corporate America has talked about that other side privately, right? That other side of that coin, which is the backstabbing and that. And I feel I get the sense, and I may be wrong, which is why I'm asking. I get the sense that one of the reasons women aren't talking about it is for fear of, adding to the stereotype of women being catty and stuff like that it's already out there. Where does that come from, that backstabbing nature that you fear? And what can we do about that?
I mean, it comes from insecurity, right? It stems from someone that's insecure. They feel threatened by the other person for whatever reason that is. And, that's not up to me to evaluate. But, on some level they feel threatened. That's the only reason. Why wouldn't you help other people or be honest and open with them, right?
Mm.
Listen, I've worked with people that I don't really care for. I'll have the conversation and say, while we need to find a way to work together, you and I personally we don't seem to mesh well. So knowing that, I'd like to have a really honest dialogue with you. How can we coincide together and make this a successful partnership? And usually when you have a conversation like that, you can kind of, move away from negativity, improve the relationship. Sometimes in my career, that's been a pivotal moment for me. And I've, actually ended up friends with the other person. But kind of clearing that air, and let's just both be who we are. Let's accept that we're not best friends, but let's find a way to support each other, work together in a positive way.
So that last bit right there, all where Heather was really digging into, we don't have to be best friends. We can find ways to collaborate, to have a connection that is mutually beneficial without being friends. We don't have to agree on everything, but we can make this valuable to both of us. And when it comes to the workplace, we can work together in a way that's valuable to the organization, and that benefits everybody. I love that she said, let's accept that we're not best friends. Like, right, just call a spade a spade. Let's accept that we're not best friends. It's fine. We're not that we don't have to be friends. We don't all have to be friends, but let's find a ways to support each other and work together in a positive way. And that brings me into the last clip I'd like to share with you. And then after I share this with you, I'll make a few final remarks, take any questions, comments you'd like to fire my way about anything, running a podcast in general, finding these incredible podcast guests, getting legends on the show, or anything about human connection and how it's related to the virtual world in particular. So the last clip that I'd like to share with you is from CHRISTIE LINDOR. Now, this is a name that you might not recognize, but CHRISTIE is just CHRISTIE's exceptional. So CHRISTIE is a management consultant. She is a rock star management consultant who worked in corporate for a consultant agency for a long time, and now she's out on her own. She's got award-winning books. Her first one called The Mece Muse, MECE. I'm not going to go into that right now. That's a consulting term, but it's really a foundational book for consultants and very highly acclaimed. And she's working on a new, she released her second book called Release, which is, as you can see here, what she was currently promoting when she was on my show. But I also got to coach CHRISTIE on her TEDx talk a couple of years ago now, and her TEDx was built out of a viral blog post she had written. She had written this blog post called Why Great People Leave Good Jobs, or Why Great People Quit Good Jobs. And we took that idea, that blog post, and we built it into a TEDx talk, and she's now built the entire foundation of her consultancy on that idea. In fact, her third book is coming out next year, and it's called Why Great People Quit Good Jobs, digging into workplace culture. And when it comes to workplace culture, as somebody like her, she's a consultant, she works with new clients all the time on some really difficult issues. The question for her is, what does this person care most about? What does this person care most about? And so let's dig into, let's listen to her. I think this is in a very short clip. We got a short clip here, and then we'll wrap it up with a little Q&A and some final thoughts.
Like, have you had circumstances where you start working with a client and you really just, you don't understand who they are, what they're going through? There's something about them that you don't jive with. How do you bridge the gap? What do you do?
It happens a lot, right? It happens often, especially over an 18-year career. You get the clients that you're just like, I don't know what I don't know, right, with this situation.
Mhm.
And for me, I think instead of focusing on what I don't know or the things that I don't understand about that particular client, I always try to find the common ground. And sometimes for some clients, that may mean, me kind of going to the conversation and trying to really learn who they are on a personal level, because maybe for them, family's most important, and family's important to me too, right? And so kind of starting out with that common thread of shared values is where I like to go first. For other people, they like to, they're very proud about their credentials and very proud about all the hard work and how far they've gotten in their life. And so maybe the connection is really, helping them and thinking about, development and sending articles on ways they can continue to have a competitive edge, right? For others, it can be more about achievement, really about, they're really, they don't talk about anything else, but they are really focused on, I want to take this organization to the next level. And I'm going to be really good friends with anyone who can help me do that. So I think it's, really finding out what are people's true motivation. And sometimes that happens when, you're having conversations with an individual and you don't just answer their question, you answer the question behind their question. And that's, to me, you can always get back to what is important to that person? What values do they hold dear? And how can I really be able to align to those said values? And again, that, like I said, that path looks different for everyone. But I feel like when I get to a point where I feel like there's so many things kind of stacked up against me, I have to take a step back and say, okay, you know what? I can't focus on all those. Let me go back to basics. Let me go back to ground one. What is the thing that we can agree on, and then kind of build back up from there.
But I bet more than the tech, you're also nervous because you've got that little voice in the back of your head, that little voice that says, you know what? You don't get to start a podcast. Podcasting is for other people. You don't have anything to say, right? There's nothing you have to say that's worthwhile. Nobody would want to listen to you. And that voice, it's really powerful. It's really compelling. That little voice at the back of our head that just says, this isn't for you. You don't get to do this. That's for somebody else smarter than you. That's for somebody else more talented than you, more educated than you. And overcoming that resistance, that's the whole game. I could talk about anything, and audio editing software looks confusing, and RSS feeds are confusing, and you just go, I went to the store and there was this be yourself is bad advice. All right, so basically the idea here is you just don't want to do too much. Don't crank this up. One way to think about it is podcasting is a very intimate medium. Just having it off to the left or to the right is going to mean that those puffs of air shoot straight past the microphone. Diction and enunciation. Pretty good, right? The way you talk to your buddy is different than how you talk to your boss. Every single song you've listened to in your entire life was written with the same 12 notes. Maybe your favorite podcaster talks like this, and this is a very radio-sounding voice. Feels like everything's already been said, but it hasn't been said by you. Choose a topic. We need to come up with a title. Plan out our first episode. Find your voice. Recording our first episode, and we do a little bit of editing. We touch it up, we clean it up, we get rid of the mistakes, and that's it. You've done it. You created and launched your podcast in a week or less on no budget. My name's Brian Miller. I'm a former professional magician turned author, speaker, coach, and consultant on human connection. And I have a background in audio engineering. Here's where I'm supposed to make sure you know I have a famous TEDx talk, but honestly, that was luck. My podcast, on the other hand, that was intentional. No, it doesn't get millions of downloads. It's not making top 100 lists across the globe. Through my podcast, I've made personal connections with legends and some of my heroes. I've built a deep relationship with my audience and increased the value of my coaching and other programs. But most importantly, I've honed my ability to see the world and contribute my perspective to a global conversation. Your life experiences are completely unique to every other single human being on planet Earth.